Imagine the scene: a family dinner that should be quiet becomes the trigger of a tragedy. A man, dominated by alcoholic fury, raises his hand against his mother-in-law, a 70-year-old lady. "Your mother is an old witch. If she appears here again, I end up with her," he shouted, her injected eyes with hatred, while the elderly woman falls to the floor, hit by a brutal blow. Looks like the end. No. Because life sometimes reserves revides that no one expects. Good night, listeners. I am Andre Branco, and you are on the Blood Ties channel, where each story is a mirror of our own battles. Today, I bring an account that proves justice is not only from the courts. Sometimes it is born from the determination of those who refuse to be a victim. Lydia Ivanovna was not the type that curved. At 70 he kept his mind sharp like an even more sharp blade. When her daughter Tatiana announced her engagement with Sergio Miroshnikov 3 years ago, the former teacher felt a chill. The son-in-law seemed impeccable, high, well-appropriate, master in a renowned factory. But there was something in his gaze, a shadow that didn't match the easy smile. In the early months, Sergio struggled to delight: flowers for his mother-in-law, helps with household chores. Tatiana, at 32, finally believed she found love. Lydia, however, noticed the smell of alcohol he was trying to disguise the night visits. Over time, the mask fell. A beer after work became vodka bottles on weekends. Tatiana dared to protest, but was silenced with a look or acid comment. Lydia, who lived in the same post, saw her daughter wither: deep dark circles, forced smiles, the glow in her erased eyes. Until that fateful Friday arrived. She entered the apartment with a tray of homemade pies. Sergio was at the table, the bottle in half, the dragged speech, his eyes glazed. Tatiana moved through the kitchen like a ghost, avoiding crossing her way. "Enough, Sergio. Look at my daughter, you are destroying her," Lydia said, her firm voice despite the shaking hand. It was the fuse. He stood up, staggers, his face in a grimace of pure hatred. "You nosy old woman. Who asked for your opinion?" Before she could react, a violent punch hit her on her shoulder, throwing her against the kin of the couch. Tatiana shouted, kneeling next to her mother, while Sergio spit threats: "This is just a warning. Whoever moves with me will end like this." Lydia got up with difficulty, the sharp back pain like a knife. But his eyes showed no fear, after a cold determination. He took the bag, looked at his daughter one last time, and whispered before closing the door, "The war hasn't started yet." The weekend was of ice and planning. Enter compresses for bruises. She has revisited every word of Sergio in recent months. He remembered how he boasted his influence with the factory boss, a family man, who despised drunks. On Monday, Lydia wore her more elegant tailleur, covered the purples with makeup and went to the factory. At the concierge, he presented himself as the mother of an employee and called for an audience with Vladimir Petrovich Kudryavtsev, the sector manager. The man, in the 50 house, received her with a firm hand grip. Grey eyes, attentive. Lydia spared no details: drunkenness, assaults on her daughter, the cowardly attack on an elderly woman. "I don't want to destroy him, Mr. Kudryavtsev. But he's out of control. My daughter has nowhere to run anymore." The manager heard in silence, crossing his fingers on the table. Then he revealed that Sergio was already giving signs of instability at work: delays, smell of alcohol, fights with colleagues. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This will not be unanswered." Meanwhile, Sergio celebrated. The factory had announced quarterly bonuses, and he, despite some small slips, thought he deserved his part. Until entering the writer. Kudryavtsev's I.O. The boss didn't even invite him to sit. Miroshnikov, I reviewed its history in recent months. Drunk, undisciplined, and now the aggressor of the elderly. Sergio paled. "This is slander. Who told you your mother-in-law was here today?" cut the manager, the cold voice. "I have grandchildren, Miroshnikov. And when a man hits a 70-year-old lady, he doesn't even deserve the breathing air." The verdict was relentless: no awards. Worse, demand for cause. "Come get your things tomorrow." The impact was like a punch in the stomach. Sergio returned home devastated, the cloudy mind. Tatiana immediately realized, Something had crumbled. He told about the resignation, but omitted the reason. He said that he would first hit accounts with Lydia. At night, he knocked on the mother-in-law's door. She opened calmly, as if waiting for him. "What did you do, your witch?" he spat, trying to force entrance. But Lydia did not give in an inch. Behind her, neighbors watched, ready to intervene. "I did what I should have done a long time ago," she replied, serena. "Protect my daughter from a monster like you. I'm going to kill you." Sergio used, but the witnesses were already approaching. "We heard everything," said a male voice behind him. "Justice sometimes does not use toga. She uses the courage of a mother who refuses to see her daughter suffer. And when a man like Sergio loses everything, work, respect, the illusion of power, he discovers, too late, that he underestimated the strength of those who seem to have defeated." The neighbor, Uncle K, face throwing a kiss, a retired military posture, military and calm voice, he turned his arms and fixed Sergio with a look that he had already seen many men as he collapsed. "Another threat, and the police will know every detail of their deeds," he warned, without changing the tone. It was not a threat. It was a sentence. Sergio, with his fists still trembling with anger, swallowed the words that burned his throat. There was no audience for his hatred theater. Only witnesses. The days that followed were the price charged for cruelty. Sergio found it too late that the world does not forgive a man who destroys what he cannot possess. The doors closed even before he pushed them. Job connections ended in embarrassing silences, cut by cold voices that repeated, like a choir, the disastrous references left by Kudryavtsev. The money evaporated as a cigarette smoke in a glass of vodka. Tatiana, who once trembling her steps, was now returning home with her hands cracked from cleaning products, her wage rapidly covering the accounts that accumulated like a curse. But he sank deeper. The bar became his office, the bottle his only counselor, and his glass companions, distorted mirrors of his own ruin. Until, one morning, Tatiana did what she should have done years earlier. She packaged the little left of her dignity and took her daughter to her mother's house. Sergio, drunk with wounded pride, appeared shouting under the windows, demanding his rights. The neighbors, tired of their show, dialed the police number before he finished the first sentence. Lydia Ivanovna watched everything from the porch, her fingers squeezing the cup of tea slightly. There was no triumph in his eyes, only the stillness of those who see justice to follow his course, slow but relentless. The daughter gradually returned to life. The flushing returned to his cheeks, the light in the eyes. 6 months later, divorce was just a stamp in a role that Sergio did not deign to contest. He was already living with another woman, other potential victim, another lost soul that confused loneliness with love. He worked when the hangover allowed, sickly sick, aged with each sip. A year after the divorce, Tatiana met Mikhail, an engineer from a neighboring, divorced city, father of an adult daughter, a man who looked at a bottle of wine as looking at any object, without desire, without fear. Lydia Ivanovna approved it with a discreet but eloquent nod. The new son-in-law was one of those who fulfill what they promise, who follow their daughter in the hospital corridor when she gives birth, who adopt a boy as if he had always been his own. In Tatiana's second wedding, the old teacher occupied the first row, receiving hugs and smiles. Many of the guests knew the story of the first marriage, the walls on the wall, the nights of terror, the escape. Now, however, there were only laughs and gifts. "How could you get rid of him so fast?" asked a friend of Tatiana, between a sip of champagne and another. Lydia Ivanovna smiled mysterious as she adjusted the shawl on her shoulders. "In my youth, I taught more than literature, dear. I taught my students that life is a chessboard, sometimes it is necessary to sacrifice a pawn to protect the queen." Sergio Miroshnikov still appeared around the city, a lame shadow of himself. Swollen face, borotted clothes, the sour smell of those who slept in square benches. He carried boxes in a grocery store for changed, while women who dare approach found in weeks that a broken man has nothing to offer beyond more breaks. Sometimes his eyes followed Tatiana at a distance, she, radiant, hand in hand with Mikhail, her son on her lap, life finally in peace. He squeezed his teeth, but did not understand. Never understood. The connection between his violent hands and the loneliness that now devoured him was a riddle beyond his ability. That winter night, while the family gathered at the house of Lydia Ivanovna, the steaming tea, the laughter of the granddaughter, the grandson sleeping in his lap, Tatiana asked the question that hovered in the air like snow about to fall, "Mom, you don't feel sorry? After all, he was my husband." The old teacher looked out the window, where the flakes danced in the light of the pole. "Too bad, my daughter is what you feel for those who make mistakes without malice. For whom you stumble, not for whom it kicks. When a man hits a woman, he is not losing control, he is exercising his. And the world has the way for these men, the loneliness they plant themselves." Mikhail nodded, running his hand on his son's hair. "Your mother is right. Some only learn when life throws them in the trash. And yet many do not learn." Lydia Ivanovna stroked her grandson's head, asleep against her chest. At 73, she knew that justice is not lightning that falls from the sky, it is a seed that is planting with firm hands. Meanwhile, in some dark alley, Sergei Miroshnikov ended the last drop of cheap wine, remembering the days when she was respected, husband, at least in appearance, beloved. But the connection between your choices and your end, that he would never do. Some men spend their entire lives looking into the mirror and only see others.